God puts it into people's hearts, his purpose. So whatever God wants to do, it's in the hearts of people. I felt like it was my role at that point to help people get out what God had put in their heart. And so it was less about me, it was more about them. How would we have known that some of that equipment that was donated that day after we prayed for it, how would we have known that would have been on the stage at those conferences, ministering to literally hundreds, if not thousands of people? We never would have seen that coming. But God had that in plan. And so I said, do you think we're okay? He's like, yeah, you should just keep going. You'll be fine. And so we just continued on our way and drove another 45 minutes or so. And he calls again. He's like, man, there's something's going on. I don't really know what's going on. I don't even know if it's safe for you to come back right now, but we need to keep an eye on it. There's this sound of bombs and air raid sirens that don't stop. And now there's reports of an attack that's taken place. I got to see you guys on little brief, we'd work together, blast it for the conference, and then we were done for 9 months, and then we get back together. But so I view myself as I played a small role in the overall grand scheme of things. It's just the truth. I'm not, I can't say, oh yeah, it's because of me, but I feel like I had a little bit of input, and so it's just cool to go in and look, even at your building and go, yeah, all right. I recognize a few things,
Yeah, but you, I think when I look at you and Carrie, you guys are probably...
We're not started yet, right?
And we're on.
Are we on?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh.
That's it.
I didn't even know we were started.
Yeah,
okay.
It was good. You were literally talking about... We're talking about this is it. This
okay, well,
everything you just said was perfect. No, it was great.
That's cool.
It was great. Right. You guys are specific. Obviously, Carrie, I didn't know her very well growing up. I mostly spent time with you, the worship team and stuff like that. But very influential. Like you said, you walk in our church and you're like, oh, I recognize the way this looks, those fine details, all that stuff really came from. And I even how you said I wasn't part of the discipleship. I feel like you were in my life. Mm-hmm. I think there's I have a top 5 in my life of men that I'm like, dude, that guy has inspired me and changed my perspective, changed my life. And you're definitely one of those people. Yeah. I mean,
well, I'm glad to make the list for sure.
You're definitely on the list. Some of the way we served together has been great. How did you see so much value in the younger generation? Because I feel like, although you've transitioned to pastor now, lead pastor, but for years you were primarily working with youth. Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I look back on those early years, I didn't view it as youth ministry. And I think that was, I look at it now and I recognize I was a little bit of a trailblazer when it came to a youth pastor role. It wasn't really a thing. I just wanted to do ministry. And so my first ministry started in high school. I made a decision to serve the Lord. And my whole life, everything I've done, I've tried to go all in on. And so I served the Lord in high school, led a Bible study, saw really fruitful time there, enjoyed it. And leaving high school, I was kind of faced with a decision, what am I going to do? I had opportunity to go to college. I did fairly well in high school and in my studies. And there were some other opportunities and different things. And I always I never really planned to do ministry. Wow. I never really looked at that as a something to shoot for. I saw my dad and pastoring and I made a decision kind of early on. I don't know if I really want to do that. And so I had my eyes set on other things. But I just started seeing God use me fruitful in leading high school ministry. After high school, it was just obvious in order to do ministry, I wasn't going to be able to do it like marriage counseling in the church. I wasn't really able to teach a Bible study in a home because I didn't have my own home. And so it just became obvious, like my best chance for ministry is with people my own age and people maybe just a generation younger than me. And so I really developed a passion just to minister to people who would listen.
So there wasn't a lot of youth ministries around, because I asked Pastor Eddie the same thing. Were there any examples?
No, I mean, honestly, youth ministry didn't start with youth ministry. It was more evangelism. Like I just wanted to see people saved. Wow. I wanted to see, people's lives, changed. And so I just began to spend my life, doing evangelism. But my evangelism and my best shot was with people that were younger than me and doing events that I liked. So whether it was, a concert or a skate park, or those are the things that I liked.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really doing youth ministry. I was just doing ministry, but it was the style that of things that I liked.
But that style was so different from church, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because I remember even like when you and Pastor, you started working with youth together, and we, even when Pastor Mono kind of came in, that I began to see your influence kind of trickle into what we were doing at our church, and it was so different. It wasn't really well received all the time. No, but you did it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I never have really been one to kind of fit a mold. I've never tried to fit a mold. I really just tried to do what I really felt God called me to do. When there was an opportunity, I would try to jump through it. That was kind of it. All of the stories with young people really came out of them. I was just more of a facilitator at the time. I was basically hosting Bible studies for years. That's really what I was doing. But they were all kids that were young people that didn't have parents that were saved. So I was picking people up and bringing them in. We were just having Bible studies, sitting around. And I remember one particular Friday night, I was just tired of doing the whole teach a little Bible study and hand out some snacks. And I really wanted to do something that was more impactful. And I remember asking these kids, like, hey, what do you guys want to do? What do you see? And all we had in this building was a bunch of beanbag chairs. And one of the kids raised their hand, wow, we need some musical instruments in here. So we had this building with beanbag chairs, but there was nothing on the stage. There really wasn't even a stage. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. And another kid's like, Pastor Adam, they didn't call me Pastor Adam. They just said, Adam, you're picking us up in this little Toyota pickup truck. There was no seatbelt laws back then. And so, I mean, record. I had a little camper shell in the back of my truck. I put 22 kids in a little half-ton Toyota pickup truck.
And their parents were just fine with that. No big deal.
Well, they didn't really, I don't think those parents, I don't think they cared, Okay. So I would just go around and just make my rounds picking everybody up. And so that night, one of the kids was like, we need a van, and I was like, oh, that's cool, yeah. And then one kid said, oh, we want to go on a missions trip, And so all of these things seemed, at the time, that seemed like super huge to me. All those things were like, that's crazy, So the next morning I was at a prayer meeting in our church, and one of the guys in our church that had just recently gotten saved, he said, hey man, I got like these guitar amps and a couple guitars and stuff. And I was wondering if you guys wanted them. And I was like, I felt like, hey man, we just prayed for this stuff. Oh, let me backtrack. They came up with all those things, and then we just prayed. And it was just like we were just kind of doing an exercise. But these kids were really praying. They were like believing God that God would answer their prayer. So the next morning, this guy comes and says, I got musical instruments. And all of a sudden, my mind went back to just that night, just last night. We prayed, or they prayed for musical equipment. And I was like, yeah, for sure. And then there was a kid in our church whose dad had a bass amp and a bass guitar. And that day, she called me and she's like, hey, my dad wants to give us some equipment that he has. And all of a sudden I realized, oh man, God's answering these prayers. And so then I called up all the kids and I said, hey, go into the yellow pages, white pages, Auto Trader, and just start asking everybody to donate whatever van you see. And sure enough, that day, somebody donated a 12-passenger van. That same night, my dad was doing a revival up in Northern California, and the church had a big like shuttle bus. I'm sure you remember the bus we used to have. And he was offering to give it to us because they had no use for it there. And so within 2 days, we had all kinds of musical equipment. We had a van and a bus. And so the only thing left was the missions trip. And I remember several months went by and I just kind of felt this pressure, like I got to take these kids on an overseas trip. They want to go, they want to travel the world. They want to do something for God. And I remember feeling really inadequate. Like, how could I do that? I felt like I'm not prepared for that. They're not prepared for that. What would we even do on a missions trip? And I remember I was praying and I just had my Bibles kind of opened up, and there's a scripture where Jesus is sending out the disciples, And he says, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. And I remember that scripture just kind of came off the page a little, and I felt like God was saying, that's you. And I said, well, that's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, a lamb doesn't have a chance really with wolves, you know? And I just felt the Lord just say, no, you're not prepared. You're not prepared, but I'm going to be with you. It's going to be okay. And that summer, we took a group of 16 teenagers to Nicaragua and Honduras.
Wow.
And literally capped that prayer. And that's when I began to realize that, you know, God puts it into people's hearts, his purpose. So whatever God wants to do, it's in the hearts of people. And I felt like it was my role at that point to help people get out what God had put in their heart. And so it was less about me, it was more about them. And really that's the story of our entire ministry. So a year later, this kid in our church, we called him Peru. His name was Mike, but he was from Peru. So his nickname was Peru, and he was a skater. And he came in and he's like, threw down some plans to a ramp. And he says, hey, I want to build this skate ramp. It'd be great, you know, to have skaters come over here and skate. And I looked at the ramp and I began to think, like, there's no way that my dad, he's so like square and, you know, everything has to, you know, every I is dotted, every T is crossed. There's no way he's going to allow us to build a skate park here. And but there was something inside of him. And I said, well, you know, give me some plans. And so he brought the plans to the skate park, to the skate ramp. And so I presented them to my dad and I said, hey, you know, this Peru wants to build a skate ramp to, you know, to witness and use as an evangelistic tool. And what do you think about that? And my dad's like, I don't know, insurance, you know, all the negatives, you know. And I found out this law that said that skateboarding is considered a hazardous sport in California, that you can't sue the property if you get hurt skateboarding. And so it kind of got us off the hook. I presented that to my dad, and he's like, let's do it. Let's do it. So I remember we bought all this wood. It's going to be a little mini ramp. So we bought a big stack of wood, put it in that same building on that Friday night, had the kids gather around this pile of wood. And I said, this is our skate park. We're going to build a skate park. You know, we're going to pray over this wood tonight. And so all the kids gathered around it, and we're just laying hands on this wood. This is going to be our skate park. We were so excited. And at the time, I was teaching at a Christian high school. I was teaching Bible classes for first period. And so the following Monday, we'd prayed over this wood on Friday. I got a guy in the church that is a door and window guy, construction guy. He said he'll help us build this. So I'm driving to teach at this school. And I get a phone call, and there's this irate man on the phone, and he's just like yelling at me, are you building a skate park? I heard you guys are building a skate ramp. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know. And he's like, my name's Mario. I'm from Lethal Skateboards, and I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, wow, you know. So I said, well, I'm on my way to teach a class. And he's like, I want you to come to my shop. And he gave me his address. So after I'm done teaching this thing, I'm out of curiosity more than anything, I go to this address. And on the door, it says Lethal Skateboards. So I walk in, and this guy, Mario, he's smoking a cigarette. And I introduce myself to him. And he goes, it's people like you, you're ruining skateboarding. I was like, well, we're trying to build a ramp, you know, to give people a place to skate. And he's like, no, yeah, that's the problem. You guys don't know what you're doing. You're building these awful ramps that no one can skate. So he throws down this photo album at me, and I open it up, and it's like Vans Warped Tour and all of these like humongous, amazing, unbelievable skate parks. And he's like, I built all those. I was like, oh, that's cool, you know?
Yeah.
I said, well, we don't have this kind of a budget. There's like no way that, you know, we'd be able to do something like this. And he's like, look, if you buy the materials, I'll come and I'll build it for you. And so I said, well, we already got the wood. And so he came down and looked at what we had. And he says, he sent me to buy a few more things. And on Super Bowl Sunday, while our entire church was watching the Super Bowl, he brought an entire crew down, and they built a half pipe during that. And once again, it was like God getting this kid had this idea in his heart, and it was just God allowing me to be part of helping him get out what was in his heart. And that's what I've really been trying to do my whole life.
I mean, you've done it, which is so. I'm just listening to these stories, and it's like, And I really appreciate your humility. So I'm not trying to like, I guess like push you to a different mindset of yourself, but it's like, I appreciate the humility, but there are very few people who would even do that, who would even think like, oh, maybe this can be possible. Maybe this, you know, like what youth pastor is going to get their kids, hey, call and ask for vans for free. Like, that's just insane. But I think that goes to show that gifting that you have is you've been able to see the good in people. You've been able to get their dreams and kind of bring them out. I mean, even for my life, like I don't remember. I was 15, 16 years old when you asked me to play the drums for the conferences, and I was not a great drummer. I mean, I thought, what the heck is this guy thinking? Like, you sure you need me to play? And you pulled the best out of us. And I think I think when you're hanging around with somebody that sees more in you than you see in yourself, it makes a huge difference. Right. And you did that, and I think those stories are incredible.
But you say I scared you though in that process.
No, it was when my first year, or the first time I started playing with you guys. I was like, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just going to do whatever he says. I'm just going to play the drums. I'm going to play my best. Do you remember the first year I played? You this is burned into my brain and my heart for the rest of my life. I knew all the songs. I practiced religiously. I learned all the songs because I knew if I don't play right, Adam's going to yell at me. He's going to turn around with his guitar, or Omar, you know what I'm talking about, and he's going to say, faster, louder, slow down. He's going to yell at me. And so I got through the whole conference. This wasn't Kansas. This was the first one after Kansas. I got through the whole thing. And we're at the end of the conference. We're celebrating. And you turn around and you go, History Maker. Play History Maker. The problem is I didn't even know what song that was. Yeah. I played it, and I played the worst drumming of my entire life. I mean, I played drums for, I think, 20 years or something like that. From the beginning of when I started to the end, that was the scariest, worst, most embarrassing day of my life. So I remember that. But you pulled the best out of me. Yeah, it was scary, but I mean, it was, towards the end, I knew this guy's just passionate about what he does. Yeah. Because you are the kind of person that goes all in with what you're doing, and I'm sure that's got you into some trouble. Have you ever experienced, like, what was like the worst pushback that you got from people when you just said, I'm just going to do something for God?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, answering that question, it goes back to literally my first decision to really serve God. I think I have to go back to I was in and out. My dad was the pastor of the church. I rebelled against that. I really wanted to be accepted by everyone. I just wanted to fit in everywhere, and I have a little bit of a outgoing personality, and so depending on where I was and who I was with would determine kind of what you'd get from me. Wow. And so I would look like a really good Christian when I was at church. I could sing the songs, and I played the drums, and I knew what to do and how to act. But as soon as I was out of that environment and somewhere else, I would chameleon right into that situation. And so I never really had an encounter with God, even though I pretended as if I did, and I pretended like that was real in my life. And so my life was up and down, in and out. I ended up getting into some pretty, I got in some trouble in junior high, ended up basically not being able to graduate from my 8th grade year, just kind of a mess. And I remember my dad said, "Hey, I'm gonna discipline you," and he had me read 3 chapters in the Bible every single day and write a 2-page book report. And I thought that sounded like absolute hell. Like, no way, man, that's crazy. Why would you? that's cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah. But it was in that summer of doing that I began to establish a relationship with God, and I began to see in Scripture my life. And he started me out with the Old Testament with the children of Israel and how they would serve God, and God would bless them, and then they would serve other idols, and the cursing and the different things that would happen upon that whole nation. I began to see that was my life. It was just up and down, and it was that summer I made a decision to serve the Lord and go all in, and I gave my life to Christ. I had an encounter with God, and But then came reality. I had to go back to school. And I remember that first day, I was all gung-ho. I'm going to live for God, man. I'm going to serve God with all my heart. But then that first day back and seeing those old faces, and all of a sudden I felt the pressure, like, man, what am I going to do? It was decision time. And I really felt that question, what are you going to do? And that was when I just boldly said, I'm going to live for God. And I went in the middle of the school. I stood up on a picnic bench. I simply said, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. I shouted it as loud as I could. I got down. No one really did anything. No one said anything. Everybody just kind of looked at me, and that was kind of the end of it. But it was a declaration that I had made. I really feel like it was my salvation experience. It was my personal declaration of faith. And from that moment on, I've never been the same. Wow. Like literally everything in my life, it drastically changed. And so when you ask that question, there's been decisions I've had to make. There's been some tough things I've had to kind of go through. It all goes back to that question, what are you going to do? And here's the thing, when you have a relationship with God and when you have an encounter with God and you make a decision that I am going to serve him, I want my life to look like Jesus. When you know who you are, then you know what to do. And so there's been countless, obstacles and challenges and different things that I've had to confront in my life. Decisions I've had to make, as a young person, a young leader, as a married man, as a pastor, as a youth pastor, all of those things, as a husband, as a father, all of those challenges and those hard decisions, but they've all goes back to that. The same question I get asked, Adam, what are you going to do? Wow. And the thing is when you know who you are, you'll know what to do. And because I gave my life to Christ and I began to put myself in Scripture, I began to discover, hey, this is who I am. And when you know that, it makes your decisions all that much easier. I don't know if that makes
makes perfect sense. I think you've made these choices. I think one of the many things I do admire about you and I look up to is that you're kind of like a it could seem, and I know that there's probably some internal struggles that you think some insecurities, but it can seem like you're the guy that's like, hey, I don't care what people think about me. Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do what I need to do. I'm not worried about who doesn't like it and who does like it or who's gonna accept it. I'm just gonna do what I need to do. And I think what you're saying, there's that confidence. I don't remember I don't know if I texted you, I called you, and I just said, hey, how do you navigate making decisions that not everybody's gonna like?
Yeah.
And you said something that I think would be helpful to hear. Do you remember the advice that you gave me?
I don't even remember.
You said,
remind me.
You said, I have 5 people in my life and I care about what they think.
Yeah.
Everybody else could have their own opinions.
Yeah. I'm not swayed by other people's opinions as much. And I know right now in our world, that's a real popular stance. Yes. So, you could talk to pretty much any pastor that you put on this podcast and ask these questions to. It's really popular to be counter and to go against the flow. But there's been times where it's not the case. And you're really making a decision and it could go either way. And people are going to question it. And there's pressure in making decisions. Yeah. Maybe even talking about like COVID. That was a real, probably most traumatic one for pastors and churches and knowing what to do. And everybody's situation is so different. And there isn't really a right answer, a wrong answer. It's just depending on where you lived and what building you were in. And so for pastors, it was extremely difficult. And I felt strongly that our church, me personally, that we were going to take these certain steps. And there was plenty of people in our own church that weren't really necessarily happy with our decision. But I felt like, no, God's word is our blueprint. I know what God's word says. And so if I know what God's word says, if I know what he did in so many different situations, I believe that God's word is a blueprint for every situation that we go through. And I think we found our answers right there in his word. And so I feel confident that if we just rely on Scripture and just do what it says, it's going to work out. And I felt like that's how it's been my whole life, And
it's kind of like it's simple, not easy, right? Like, it's like, I get it. I know I got to obey this, but there's going to be pushback. There's going to be these people that are going to leave. And so I think even like me hearing that, it's like, okay, I get it, but I mean, how do you not allowing that to sway you? You're still hearing the words. You're still hearing the gossip. You're still seeing all that. Like, what is it that clicks in your head that's like, I'm not going to let that stop me?
Like I said, it goes back to that high school decision. Adam, what are you going to do? And once I made that choice, I was okay to live with the consequences. You know, Adam, what are you going to do? I'm going to live for God. That was probably the hardest choice I had to make at one point. And once I made that choice, I just determined that was going to be the way I lived for the rest of my life. And so, yeah, there's been challenges. There's been all kinds of things we've gone through in our world. There's been things that we've gone through personally. And every single time I go back to that. Adam, what are you going to do? I'm going to live for God. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to follow my convictions. I'm going to continue to lean on the Lord and trust what he says. And I'm going to interpret what he says through my own life. Wow. And make those decisions accordingly. And so far it's worked out. I can't say every decision I've made is right, but I can say that God's seen me through every decision, because in my heart I've wanted to do what's right. Yeah.
There was and your decisions to do that has changed so many other lives. I think if you wouldn't have went to that school bench and shouted what you needed to shout in order to solidify that decision that you made, I mean, I can't even say where my life would be, because my life was changed at the conferences and the services that you guys felt in your heart, even beyond the pushback, even all those things. I mean, again, I just had a conversation with Pastor Eddie, and a pivotal moment in my life was at a conference. Yeah. Was at a youth conference where, I mean, I was somehow behind stage and I just got completely touched by God, and it changed my life. And I think so when you and Carrie were at the church, and I was like, man, these guys changed my life. It's not just a nice statement about some people that I've known for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's truth. Yeah. I mean, it's been an extravagant change. It's because of the decisions you made that I'm thankful that I have people to look up to that have done that, because not everybody has that, you know. But I love those conferences, man. Those things were the highlight of my years, dude.
I look back on those with great joys, great memories, man. Honestly,
I got to I was in the middle phase, the middle generation of that, because you guys had started without me. Yeah. When you started the conferences, I wasn't even allowed to go to them. I was too young. The first one I went to was...
We would have snuck you in. It would have been okay.
Yeah, probably. Well, no, Pastor Eddie, I hope you see this one. He told me one time, he's like, hey, if you really want to go, you need to write a letter and tell me why you should go. So I put my thought into it. I put my heart into it, and he still didn't let me go. It didn't even matter. But I was a part of that, you know, I kind of snuck around the first generation of it. And then I was able to be a part of that second run. And then there was a third run that happened with Drew and all those guys, which we weren't really there, but we saw it from a distance. But I remember the beginning years. Like, it's funny because you guys prayed for musical equipment, and that's, I feel like, something you guys were known for was like the music that you played, the worship team you had.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Because that was in the heart of it wasn't even in my heart. It was in the heart of these kids that was so instrumental. And that's what I mean. God always puts it into the heart of his people what he wants to do. His will always lands in people's hearts. And when we help people get it out, it really benefits the whole body. That's a great thing. So how would we have known that some of that equipment that was donated that day after we prayed for it, how would we have known that would have been on the stage at those conferences, ministering to literally hundreds, if not thousands of people? We never would have seen that coming. But God had that in plan. Yeah, for sure.
Those the musicians you had were incredible. I just remember thinking, like, these guys are just, it was the best worship team that I ever heard in my life, like in person especially. I remember you guys used to change all these songs around to make them kind of fit. But one thing I did want to ask you about, and if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. Yeah. But I was close to a lot of those people that were on the team, and I don't want to say names and stuff. Yeah. But I remember there was that season for you guys when a bunch of just stuff came out.
Oh yeah.
And a bunch of sin was brought up, and I remember for me, I was because they're my family and friends, and I was heartbroken. Like, what the heck? This is reality.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed as if like all that good that you guys had when it came to those parts of ministry, it seemed like it crumbled all in like a season. Yeah. And I've never talked to you about it, and I've always been curious, like, how did you deal with that? I mean, how did you even hear, like, how did you even find, like, you don't have to tell us what happened, but how did you even find out?
Extremely humbling.
I want to thank our sponsors, David Hernandez Ministries, for sponsoring this podcast. Also, all of our Bold community partners. I appreciate you guys so much. Listen, if you want to help us keep this podcast going, you can become a financial partner to the Bold podcast and join the Bold community by going to our website and signing up. Also, on our website, you can check out our merch. All of our partners get 20% off the merch store.
Extremely humbling for me. You know, I was so passionate, and as you know, I'm very intense. You know, we were very intense. I just wanted to. I felt like there was nothing that we couldn't do. We put our hearts to, put our minds to. When we were at the time, we were literally traveling all over the world. We planted a church from our youth ministry into London, England. We were recording an album. I mean, there was so many like really amazing things, and there was such genuine conversion. And a lot of the young people that had gotten saved. In our movement, we had break dancers and musicians and athletes, and it was just a sovereign move in so many different genres. And I felt like there was really no stopping what God was doing through us. And I think probably even in me, there was a little bit of pride, a little bit of arrogance that in what was happening. It was probably bigger than I ever expected. It was bigger than I ever dreamed, and it came crashing down quick, and I didn't even see it coming. It was like a blind side where sin kind of got in the camp. That's the only thing I can say is that all of a sudden it was sin that started to come out in different ways, and of course I just loved God. I had a pure heart, and so I was heartbroken to see young people that we had given our hearts to and served and loved and had invested in. It was heartbreaking to see their lives and their dreams kind of squashed because of sin. It was devastating. You know, I look back on those years, and I tell you that those were some of the most fond memories I ever had. And yet, it's such a disappointment too when you look back, because you realize there was so much potential, and yet some of that potential got squandered. And sin got in there, and it happened so fast. I don't even know how to describe. All I know, it was extremely painful for me to witness, because I loved these people, and to see Satan just get in there and rip them off. And rip off what God was doing, the pure movement that we had. It was a discouraging time for sure.
I mean, I think I felt like I was definitely closer to the situation than probably a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Just because it was my family and it was friends of mine, we were all connected, and it was. I remember just thinking, like, man, is this real? Like, I thought I knew these people, you know. And do you think, looking back, do you look and say, man, there were some little things that I missed?
Oh, for sure.
And if I would have paid attention a little more here or there.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to look back and you know, I was super young. I had a young family. I got married when I was 19. You know, God gave us this move when I was in my early 20s, and I had 2 young kids, and so there was a lot of stuff that was stealing my focus. But I think if anything, we were a little bit out of balance, because it was all go, and not a lot of work on inside.
Wow.
Not a lot of emphasis on that personal daily encounter. It was more like, we're doing this for God. We're going, and not a lot of stop and let's look inward. And so there's a lot of things I wish I could do over. I wish I could change. I didn't know better. I was just excited at what God was doing, and I wanted to express that as much as we possibly could. And I mean, knowing what I wish I wish I had today's knowledge, and at that time I just didn't. I learned from that.
It's the growth of being in ministry, being
absolutely.
a leader.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember seeing that and thinking, man, like, and I mean, I was very young, like, I don't know even what year that was, but I remember thinking, like, man, is that the end of all this?
Yeah.
Like, is it over?
But it wasn't.
And I think that's what's so cool about staying faithful in ministry.
Yeah.
And like that decision you made, I'm sure you asked the same question, right? Adam, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Right. In that moment. And it's like, you had to keep going.
And we did. And we did, and God raised up new people, and restored some of the people that had fallen away and backslidden and left ministry. God restored them, and today I look on some of those families that I at one point I thought, oh man, what a tragedy. Actually, it turned out for good. God used it for good. Today, some of the people that I was so distraught over today are living for God. They've got a great family. They're serving God and His purpose. And it was a bump in the road for them. For us at the time, it seemed devastating. But God saw the bigger picture, and those encounters that they had, they're still living proof of that today.
And all this time, it's kind of like, it's kind of you and Carrie, right? You carry your kids, young kids, and you're going through all these different things in ministry. You're doing the youth ministry together. I mean, she's one of my favorite like speakers.
Yeah, mine too.
I'm sure for sure yours. But I remember like when she would do the conferences, I would love when because she always was able to bring something out in such a creative way. And I thought that both of you guys are super creative. But you've gone through all these things in ministry, and you're serving God, and I'm sure you're going through the ups and downs of life. But then you're serving, and then you go through what I believe to be one of the hardest things you've ever had to go through with Carrie.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? What happened there?
Yeah, we got blindsided. We were on a trip to Havasu. We have a place in Havasu that we go, and we're just out on the lake, and we're talking. We're just getting ready to celebrate our 25th anniversary. It's just really excited. We're a few months out from 25 years of marriage, and we're talking about where we could go and how we could celebrate. And while we were on that trip, she located a lump in her breast, and we went back home. She went to the doctors and found out, and they determined and diagnosed her with breast cancer. And it was a fairly aggressive form, to the point where it was going to require surgery, double mastectomy, chemotherapy, and all of that. And so it was like we got thrown in from going from a celebration mode to all of a sudden, like, man, we're in fight mode. And it was extremely scary, and it was confusing, because here we've just served God and tried to serve our generation and tried to love people and do what's right and raise our kids, and to get hit with that, it makes you question, like, why this doesn't seem right. God, where are you? This isn't supposed to happen to us. This isn't supposed to happen to me. And that lasted for about a week, and then I realized, this is going to end in healing. Like, this is an opportunity. That's all of a sudden we just felt like, whatever we have to face, God's going to see us through. He's never let us down. We trust Him, and we just started to rephrase and reframe our whole thought process that this is going to end in healing. And it was a year battle of leading the church and fighting this disease. And it wasn't something that I had to do alone and let Carrie work through cancer. No, it was awesome, because we did it together. Wow. And she's showing up at church, and she's getting up on there on a microphone, and she's got her shiny bald head, and she's preaching truth. And we look at it now. I mean, it was a fight and it was hard, but we look at it now. What an opportunity God gave us in that moment to be an example of, hey, we can go through struggle, and life is full of it. We're all going to go through different things and different seasons that we're not going to be happy about and aren't going to be the greatest. But it's how we respond in those seasons. And it was a gift to us, because this took place in 2019. And for the whole year, we had the opportunity, and we would have been justified to quarantine and to hide and to stay in our home and protect ourselves. but we chose not to do that.
Wow.
That in the face of a deadly disease and doctors telling you to stay home and protect yourself, we said no. We're gonna continue to serve the Lord. We're gonna be an example. We're gonna be there for the people that God's given to us. We're gonna do it. And what was amazing is it was that season that gave us the strength to face 2020 with the same mindset. So when everybody else was talking about let's go into hiding, we got to protect ourselves and love our neighbors and all that stuff, we were like, whoa, wait a second. There's no way we're doing that. We didn't do it last year when there was really a threat, and we're certainly not going to do it now. And so I view the timing of that and then what we went through, I view it as a gift from God for us, and it's still paying today. Like God literally does take all things and he turns them for his good and for his glory to them that love him. And it's one of those things that you don't really understand it or you can't really explain it until it happens. And this has been great. It's really helped us with compassion. And there's been so many people that we've known, even other pastors and their wives, going through the same exact thing that we've been able to meet with and talk to and have compassion for and give advice to. And I just, it's been awesome to be able to do that for people.
Do you think in that time, was there ever a time where you were like angry with God or wanting to just stop?
No.
No.
Oh man. No. That season was probably one of the closest seasons I've ever had with God.
Wow.
It really forced me to trust him. What else could I do? There's nothing else to do other than to trust God. I can't win this battle on my own. I can't fight it. We literally have no other choice but to give it to God and believe that it's going to end in healing. Giving up isn't really an option at this point. And so, no, honestly, that year was probably one of the greatest years of faith I've ever experienced. And I think that's what struggle does. That's what hardship does. It forces you. It's when things are good that you put your guard down. We just talked about that. His season of ministry was going so good. I never even saw it coming. I never saw there was a lurking sin and issues. I never even saw it coming because everything was going so good. Like how could there be anything wrong? But it's when everything is upside down and you don't know up from down and you're wondering, how am I going to do this? That's when you have no choice but to trust God. And everything that you've believed and everything that you've read, everything that you've prayed now gets put to the test.
Wow.
And for us, it was a great season of learning, a great season of, I mean, I can't say I'd want to experience it again, and I certainly don't wish it on anyone, but I believe it was a gift. Looking back on it, I know that it was a gift from God for us.
So you get through that.
Yeah.
I mean, I really hope you got to be working on some kind of book or something, man. There's got to be something.
People, you keep telling me that.
I keep telling you that because I think the way you speak, the way that you're able to articulate a thought, the way that you're able to tell a story, and I don't know, that's just my opinion, but you guys have gone through these different things. You have these stories, and then it seems like everything's kind of going well, right?
Yeah.
Carrie gets healed. It ends in healing. There's thousands of stories I'm sure you could tell through that season, and then you go on a trip, right?
Yeah.
And so, what was the purpose of this trip, and what happened?
You know, Carrie really wanted to go to Israel with her dad, and it was a trip that, you know, her parents had been to Israel so many times, and Carrie's really wanted to experience that with her dad and go to all the sites and have him explain all the different locations where Jesus ministered and all the different events that happened biblically. And so we were so excited. It was almost like we were getting a rewind. We weren't able to have that trip for our 25th. So this was kind of like, this is that dream trip that we just thought we could take together. And it was awesome. We flew into Israel and landed there and shot straight over to the Sea of Galilee. And we spent a whole week on the Sea of Galilee. Beautiful. Like it was amazing. Went to Nazareth and went to all the villages where Jesus did ministry and where he called his disciples and where he cast out the demoniac and where he walked on water. Oh yeah, it was my first time there. Oh, it was amazing.
I've never been.
It was amazing. The food was amazing. The experience was amazing.
So I have to ask, because I know you're going to get into the point of the story.
Yeah.
But did it feel any different?
Oh,
like I've
for
always
sure.
wondered that. Like,
without question. And I never thought it would either, because it's land. But Pastor Larry made a really good point. Carrie's dad made a really good point. He said, Israel is a place where every single day people from all over the world come and they worship. And I remember we got out on the Sea of Galilee. We secured a boat. We had a tour guide take us out on a boat, and it's just a regular boat. It's just a regular lake. I mean, it doesn't, you don't think much of it, but when you get out on that lake, and then all of a sudden they began to play a worship song, and all of a sudden you start to realize, nah, man, the disciples were on a boat just like this in this very location, and this is where Jesus walked across the water, and you can't help but feel like something different. Like there's a different spirit. I think because the Lord is worshiped there nonstop in every language. I feel like that's what's created this atmosphere that is really special. It really, really is. One of the things my bucket list is to be on the Sea of Galilee. I can't walk on water, but the closest thing I could do is paddleboard, and it's like walking on water. And so Carrie and I, the last day we were in Galilee, we rented paddle boards and we went out there and we're paddling on the lake. Cool. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. And so that's really how you do a tour in Israel, is you start with the beginning of Jesus' ministry, where he spent the majority of his time with his disciples was right around the shores of Galilee. And so we did that for a week, and it was really, really special. And then we started to make our trek just like Jesus did. You're kind of following his footsteps. And you leave the Galilee region and you go up towards Mount Hermon and Caesarea Philippi. And this is where Jesus took his disciples. And this was a really important place in that history, because it was where all of the authorities and government and all of the wickedness of culture, it all culminated in this one place of worship. And it was called the Gates of Hell. And literally it's where Pan was worshipped, and all kinds of child sacrifice and sexual deviance and all kinds of just all kinds of deviance. It had been like Vegas of their day.
Okay.
And so Jesus would have taken his disciples. This isn't a small walk. This would have been days' journey away from Galilee. He would have taken them up there. He didn't perform any miracles. He didn't do really any teaching. He just simply went up there, and in front of that area, he asked the disciples, who do people say that I am? And it was in that atmosphere that Peter says, you're the Son of God. And Jesus said, that's revelation.
Yeah.
And he says, and we're going to do something. We're going to build a church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it. I always figured he was talking about hell, but he was really talking about the most powerful forces of that day, the most powerful forces in government and culture, everything that was right in front of them that seemed so big. Jesus is like, this doesn't stand a chance against what we're about to do.
Wow.
And I really felt like, man, this is so amazing, because that's what we're up against, is culture and government and all these different forces that we're trying to overcome. And we have the power with Christ that nothing can stand against the church. Anyways, that was just such a powerful thing. But we left Caesarea Philippi, and just like Jesus, made our way to Jerusalem. And we ended up in this really cool apartment. It's a high-rise apartment overlooking the old walled city. And so from this high-rise, I could look down and see the Dome of the Rock and the city where it's just an amazing place. I could look out over the Mount of Olives, and it's like, whoa, everything
surreal.
I've read is like coming to life. And so we landed in Jerusalem on it was Thursday night, and it was beaming with excitement. I mean, I looked down on the streets, and people are rushing towards the old city, and it was in the evening, and Carrie's parents wanted to kind of stay and chill out and hang out, and Carrie and I were like, let's go down to the walled city and walk around. Let's go check it out. And everyone's making their way there because it's the Sabbath, and it's an important Sabbath because it's the end of the Feast of the Tabernacles. It's a massive celebration, big time holiday. And so everyone's going to basically the Temple Mount or the Wailing Wall. They're going there to pray, and then they're going to return to their homes and celebrate. That's what's going on. And so the city is lit. So Carrie and I, we just kind of get into all this, and we're walking down, and everyone is going. There's thousands of people. That night, there was 40,000 people praying at the Wailing Wall.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's just a sea of humanity. So we were right there in the midst of that. And I told Carrie, let's not go impede on the Wailing Wall. We'll save that for a different time. So we started walking away from it, and we didn't know where we were. It's like a maze in this old city. And all of a sudden we got to a point with an armed guard, and he said, Muslim? And we're like, no. And he's like, no. And we realized then, oh wait, this is different. Like there's contrasting forces at work. And so we left, and we went back to our apartment. And the next day, because it's Sabbath now, everything's shut down. Literally nothing's open. So we had planned, because we couldn't really do anything in Jerusalem, that we would leave and we'd go to Masada. We'd go to the Dead Sea that day. So we got up early in the morning, and we left Carrie's parents there at the apartment, and we took off, and we actually drove out of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is the city on a hill, so literally it is. And we drove out of the city and down the hill and the backside of the desert towards the Dead Sea on the other side of Jerusalem. Went to Masada. We're on our way to Masada, and all of a sudden we get a phone call. And it's Carrie's dad, and he's like, hey, I don't really know what's going on, but we're hearing the sound of like bombs, and there's air raid sirens going off. And so I'm driving, I'm just thinking, probably normal. Like we hear about this kind of stuff all the time. Can't be that big of a deal, I'm sure it's fine. And so I said, do you think we're okay? And he's like, yeah, you should just keep going. You'll be fine. And so we just continued on our way and drove another 45 minutes or so. And he calls again. He's like, man, there's something's going on. I don't really know what's going on. I don't even know if it's safe for you to come back right now, but we need to keep an eye on it. There's this sound of bombs and air raid sirens that don't stop. And now there's reports of an attack that's taken place. And I was like, whoa. And we started feeling like a little bit like, man, this is kind of crazy. And we went up to Masada and checked out this massive historical fortress. But inside, we just felt like a little bit of a check. And we talked to a military person that was there, and he started crying. And he's like, yeah, there's something going on. And so we said, well, we better go back to Jerusalem. And so we started heading back, and we got to the city, and the entrance to Jerusalem was blocked.
Oh, no. Like
we couldn't get in. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do, man? I mean, I don't know my way around here. Jericho's that way, but that's Muslim, I mean, this is crazy. And so I took my Apple map and kind of went around the perimeter and found another entrance, and we ended up getting into this city only to find out that Israel was under attack. It was basically an all-out war that they'd been attacked from literally all sides, and it was crazy. October 7th, a day that I'll never forget for sure.
And so you guys were, how did you get out? What happened?
Well, I mean, we didn't have any intention of getting out. We didn't know what we were dealing with. We felt like we could just continue on, spend the rest of the week there. And but what we learned quickly is that everything had shut down. It was like Israel was experiencing a September 11th, but on a much wider scale. There was deep mourning in the whole city. No one was working. And so, like, it was hard for us to find places to eat. It was hard for us to really do anything. But it was unique in the same time is that we got to experience Israel in Jerusalem, especially, in a real different way. In other words, we went to the garden tomb where it's believed that Jesus resurrected and where his body was laid. And normally there would be 3,500 people waiting in line just to step into that tomb for a few seconds and take a picture and move on. But when we went, there was literally no one there except for us. And so we got to sit in that area, and really it was a time of deep reflection. We literally scoured the old city, and we walked through all of the little areas, and
Was it safe to do all that?
I mean, what choice do we have? It was kind of like sit in a hotel or sit in a condo and worry, or you're there, you might as well see it. And so yeah, we were just walking around and went to the Mount of Olives, and I'm there looking at the closed in eastern gate that has been blocked in, and the reason it's covered, and it used to be the gate that entered into the temple, but now it's been cement blocked in and closed up, because they know that the Messiah is returning. It's prophesied the Messiah is returning, and he will enter into that east gate. And I remember standing on the Mount of Olives, looking directly at that east gate, and thinking to myself, it could happen right now. Like literally, like the stage is set for the return of Christ. I'm here. I felt like an overwhelming amount of excitement. Yes, it was scary in some ways, but there was also this deep excitement, like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Like this is history. And I really felt like I was as close, I was closer definitely to the return of Christ than I was before I went.
Yeah.
And to be there and to realize, no, someday Jesus is going to come. He's going to land on this exact location. This hill is going to split. Fresh water is going to flow to the Dead Sea. These tombs that are all right here in this valley are going to split open, and Jesus is going to walk through that east gate. I mean, when you start to think about that, it's like, whoa, this is amazing. And so we got to experience that part of Israel in a really unique way, and I'm grateful for that. But there was also this other part that, how are we going to leave? Because all of a sudden, all the airlines started shutting down. Our flight got canceled. And so now we're kind of like trying to do different things. And by the time it was all said and done, I had $15,000+ on my credit card of 5 different airlines that we had tried to purchase, and every single one of them was canceled.
Wow.
And so we got to a point where we have to leave this condo. We have nowhere to go. Our only choice is to go to the airport in Tel Aviv and wait it out. And so we had kind of made that decision. The 4 of us, we sat around, we were eating lunch, and we just said, that's what we're going to do. And so we went back to our condo, and it was getting late at night, later in the evening, and someone sent me a text and said, hey, Tim Kennedy from Save Our Allies is helping people get out of Israel. You should fill out this survey. And so I filled out the little thing and said, yeah, we're stuck here in Israel. And I gave them all of our information. And in about 2 hours, I got a phone call from a lady from Save Our Allies. And she said, hey, we've gotten your application. We want to help you guys get out. Can you get to Haifa tomorrow? And now Haifa is in the north.
Okay.
Tel Aviv is really closer to Gaza. It's literally 30 minutes or 30 miles away from Gaza, where all the fighting is. And so I was like, I didn't want to go to the airport. I don't want to go near the fighting. So when he says, can you get to Haifa? I'm thinking in my mind, okay, yeah, I can get there. What am I going to do with my rental car? All my thoughts. I said, no, we can go. And she said, okay, tomorrow there's a private airport. We're gonna hook you up, and we're gonna fly you on a small plane out of Israel. And so she said, stand by, someone's gonna call you. And so that night I stayed up the whole night, just like by my phone. I didn't want to fall asleep and miss the call. And sure enough, like 3 a.m, a guy calls me and he says, hey, I'm from Save Our Allies, and we're gonna get you out of Israel. Today's gonna be an easy day. And he basically stayed with us and kind of instruct us all the way through, all the way to the point that we ended up going towards Haifa. We got on a little small 4-passenger plane, and they flew us right out of Israel into Cyprus.
It's a little bit of a miracle, huh?
Total miracle. Amazing.
That's exciting.
It was exciting.
That's a perfect story for a book. But I think it's just like the culmination of your life. These little decisions, these yeses, this boldness to walk in, and it's like this life of excitement.
Yeah.
And I think that's so
ride,
cool.
man.
Like, dude, your story is consistently getting better. You know what I mean? I think that says a lot about that one day. What are you gonna do, Adam?
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna make the decision. I'm gonna follow Christ, and I think too what I admire about you is the way you handle your family, the way you love your wife, the way that you love the church, and like I said, man, you've changed my life by your example, and so I think it's I'm grateful for that, man. You are a hero in the faith, a legend for our generation for sure, and so it's good to have you, man. I love the story. I want to get this. We got to do this again. I would love to get you on again because I'd love to hear some stories about family and marriage.
Yeah.
And you guys came out and did the marriage retreat for us at the church. Did an incredible job. And so I appreciate you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, man.
Even though you were planning on doing this tomorrow.
Yes, my fault. I'm so sorry.
I'm thankful that you're here.
It never happens.
Today. You know what's funny is when we're all like, where's Adam? I'm like, he wouldn't miss today.
No.
He wouldn't be late. This is weird.
Very weird.
And so when I called you scared me. But man, thank you so much for being on, dude. Appreciate you. Love you.
Proud of you.
Good stuff.
Keep it up.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, make sure you leave it a like and a comment below. Let us know what you think. If you like content like this, you can subscribe to our channel, turn on the notifications so that you can be notified every single time we release a podcast just like this.